today by Professor Chris Lorte. Good morning.
Good morning. Morning, Alec. Good to be part of this.
I've really enjoyed this Chris's ministry, especially during my time at Horizon. I believe it was I can't remember the exact course that you taught. I believe it was something around the Old Testament that we.
Yeah, I was trying to remember exactly which course it was. It could have been Pentateuch, perhaps.
Could have been, yeah.
I taught that a couple of times at Horizon, but I also taught major prophits in it. And that might have been
the Pentateuch kind of rings a bell a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it might have been those particular books I think we were studying on that week. And so now you are at Providence College.
That's right. Yeah, I'm at Providence University College. I started in November of 2017, so it's coming up to 4 years, or I guess 4 years this week.
Yeah.
I'll be at Providence. So yeah.
So how are things, I guess, during this current pandemic that we're having right now? Like how have things been for you guys down at Providence? And you're still.
Yeah. For those who maybe don't know Providence, we're about half hour south of Winnipeg.
Yep.
We have a really nice campus out there. We just opened a new residence for the students. Yep. And with COVID, the previous couple of years, it wasn't able to be full, but now we're able to have dorm students there, and so it's really added to the life of the school, and so that's a big positive for sure. As far as teaching goes, yeah, it's nice to be back in the classroom where we're having in-person classes. For several of the classes, we're allowing students to have the option to join through Zoom if necessary, and trying to accommodate different things, because with COVID, there's time for isolation and those sort of things that might be necessary through the semester.
Yeah.
So it's been a welcome change to actually see student faces and to have some interaction that way. So it's going well. It's been a good start to the semester, and we're almost through, I guess.
Well, I do understand that there was a lot of colleges, not only Bible colleges, they kind of had to go in that direction of having to do a lot of online stuff, and not only colleges but also churches kind of had to go in that direction just to kind of keep their people, ministered to, and I know that our church had gone through the same situation, and I believe it was happening almost all around the world with whatever technology that you have, and I know it was a bit of a challenge for all of us, and but here we are, and vaccinated or not, or all those days.
It's definitely made a big change, and we went in the spring of 2020, went right on line fairly quickly, and then it was a big learning curve, and then we tried some in-person classes in the fall, but then that quickly changed, and we went basically all online. So we had to learn new technology right away, and try to create a classroom, like the environment where students are connected and those sort of things. It was a challenge, but I think we've come through it well, and we've learned a lot of things along the way that hopefully can improve the experiences for the students going forward, both in class and maybe other ways of learning.
And what it was unfortunate. The reason that it's interesting you mentioned about the new campus or the new residence that you had built, and it was unfortunate because from my understanding, I understand that the former building had burnt down to the ground.
It was that's right. It's just before my time at Providence. Actually, I had the job posting was just up there, and the next time I was looking at the school, and then very shortly after, or looking at things about Providence, very shortly after, it was Bergen Hall, which was the previous residence there, did burn. There were plans already in place to improve the residence there, but definitely the fire at Bergen, which completely burnt the residence to the ground, and provided the immediate necessity to build a new residence.
it's a great campus because I had the opportunity to visit it a few times, taking
Yeah.
classes, those 1 week modules,
Yeah.
and I even had been given the privilege of even staying there if I chose not to stay. If I choose not to stay in a hotel, they were gracious enough to offer me a room, paying
Hmm.
a small fee, of course, and yeah, just a wonderful campus, and it's
Yeah.
kind of out of the way. What is it? About half an hour south of Winnipeg, city of Winnipeg.
Yep. Yep. Just half hour south, and it's kind of hidden away a little bit. Like if you don't
Yep.
know it's there, but it has yeah, really nice scenery,
Yeah.
and really is like a good sort of, when you're on campus, there's a good energy, a good space, even though we're south of Winnipeg. And we're trying to really emphasize about how that provides a unique
Hmm.
learning
Yeah.
opportunity as well,
Yeah.
to be connected to the land
Yeah.
and the place around there as well.
Yeah, I mean the campus there is so wonderful. So I would I'll give you the opportunity just to kind of explain a little bit more about that, of how people can find out more information and enroll and
Yeah,
just yeah.
yeah, for
Again,
sure.
I'll give
Like
you a few minutes after. Yeah.
our webs or after or now or
Yeah,
yeah.
after will be fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But I do want to give you as much time as possible to kind of discuss some of these things
Yeah.
that we've been communicating about. And this whole idea of theological matters, and this is the whole series of why theology matters. And even during my conversation so far up until this point, have been very interesting. Have been very moving, because it's kind of, it also has helped me understand the importance of theology. And just by some of the stuff I've already sent you, it seems to be this real declining awareness of the importance of theology, and especially amongst evangelicals. And sometimes this can kind of lead into all kinds of confusion and heresy, and people kind of interpret the Bible in the ways that they think is best fit for their lives. So it's almost like you're creating this concept of God that's going to best fit your life, rather than God fitting into your life. And so, and I know that you're probably going to be know you're going to be sharing some examples in regards to that. But you had thrown the idea out at me. But first of all, before I get into that, um, maybe would you be able to address maybe some of those issues that are kind of facing, the church today, as to why did it feel like theology is not really one of those important aspects, that we should be operating in or learning even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Like yeah, that's a tough question. Like, and partly before I was moved to Providence, I pastored a church for 5 years in Saskatchewan,
Mm-hmm.
and I was the lead pastor of community, and partly. So this question isn't just a question that I think about with, like, in the classroom context or within the professor context. It's also in the service of the church, and being a pastor. And one of the things that I think is one of the bigger struggles is just the amount of time and impact that we have in the world around us, and how our lives are organized, are kind of go, and the time to kind of sit back and reflect on some of those questions in a theological way just seem overwhelming, and there's just not even the space to do those sort of aspects.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the difficulties is the connection between the practical and the theoretical, and we are bombarded by so many different ways of thinking, ways of being, ways of thinking in our everyday lives, that we're almost want to, like, a lot of people in the congregation often say, well, just tell me how to think, or how this matters, right there. Kind of jump to the conclusion, and jump to that sort of just give me that sort of core nugget that I can think about. And like Twitter is one of those things, and like I'm on Twitter, I follow those sort of conversations, but if we can get it into 140 or now like 280 characters, well, then that is the slogan that I have for the day, and that sort of thing. And then and so we want those sort of compact statements, and you can't deal with the complexities a theological wrestling in those sort of short characters, even though there's plenty of, theologians who are out there who are distilling some of their major thoughts into these things. There's still, each one of those statements begs like a much deeper and more profound question. There's just not always the space to unpack those aspects. And so that's one of the challenges that I definitely see in the world today, and in the Christian world. And so that's a significant sort of problem that we have to try to address. And I know when I was pastoring, one of the things that I had to learn early on, which I don't know if I was always successful in this, but the recognition that you can't unpack everything in the time that you have in the way that you sort of want. And I partly had to pull back and say like, all right, well, like if you think of, you just kind of pick off a little piece, and then try to put things together at various points. Well, that might be the way to try to show how thinking theologically really impacts a person's world, and helps you get to those sort of conclusions that you're desiring, that you really want to help you shape your life. And
it's not so much as we're trying to make believers into these real hardcore theologians, or that they have to read commentaries and Bible dictionaries and all that, but it's just grasping an idea of who God is. And I had a discussion just prior to this one. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Jerry Shepherd in Edmonton, Alberta. And he made some very interesting points about we talk so much about God, and yes, of course, we are commanded to love God, but we are also, but I think in terms about a marriage relationship, right? We say I love you, but do we really know that person? But because the love is in the knowing. And so if we're ever going to fall in love with God, and we're going to fall in love with Jesus, and then obviously we got to know who this God is that we are commanded to love, and dwelling on the fact that he loves us in return. But in that whole, and again, thinking theologically is okay then. So who is this God? So I don't know, like you want to think maybe comment further on that thought?
Yeah, like part of the wrestling is that already, like what does it mean to love, and then what does it mean to explore that love? And you use the description of like a marriage relationship. Well, the process of love and the understanding of love is something that isn't the same love that I had for my wife back 15 years ago. It's different now, because we've experienced a lot of life together, like 15 years and 2 children, 5 or 6 moves, like in different places, and going through some like 15 years is a lot of time for different things to come up, and then so that love grows, and that love develops, and love changes. But one of the things that is the most important in that growing of the love is that we stay in communication with one another, and that we're growing in the same sort of place, in the same area together. And that's where that love wouldn't grow if we were in or it would grow differently. It would be more difficult if we were in different places in those sort of aspects. And so, like to then pull that back to God, the exploration of love is that sort of that time, that shaping, the going through the struggles, and trying to learn more about that individual, like, and even in sort of small ways. Every now and then I'll tell a story about like something that when I was younger, and my wife will say like, I never heard that story. I didn't know about you. And I'm like, well, sometimes those things don't quite pop up until there's occasion for it. And then you learn a little bit more about that person. And that's part of our journey with God. And that's part of why theological wrestling, and you're right to say not like, dense theological commentaries, but wrestling with a view to how does this impact the relationship that I'm journeying with God with, and to continue to explore that. And
and as you're talking, this is the whole idea of thinking theologically is almost kind of seems to be that mundane idea, that, well, because as soon as we start to hear that term theology, we say, well, what, that's more for academics, and I'm not really interested in commentaries or Bible dictionaries and lexicons and so on, and it just really isn't for me. Or as long as I can just love God, love people, go to church and pay my offerings or tithes or whatever, and just hold out until Jesus comes or until we all get to heaven, kind of idea. But it was interesting because Dr. Shepherd had shared on, I kind of touched a little bit on the idea of covenant. Well, because that all plays in these matters of theology, right? And that's who God is all about. You come into like just even in our conversation right now, that it is a covenant relationship with our spouses, but it's also a covenant relationship with God himself. So as we understand theology and walking in that divine covenant with God, keeping our end of the bargain, and God is obviously going to keep his end, right? And so I don't know, like that whole idea of covenant could definitely play a part even in our lives as we begin to think about theology.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for the Christian, when they, to be found in Christ, to be found a part of God's covenant community, there's sort of stipulations that kind of go back and forth about how does one journey together in relationship, and how does one exist together with God. And so I believe you might have talked, I think Jerry just published a Leviticus commentary. Right. And so that's probably why I was coming back up a little bit. And interestingly enough, Lisa and I had lunch on Monday, and she was mentioning the impact Jerry had on her life. So theologically, so that's an interesting connection point there. But like Leviticus outlines, what does it mean to live in covenant relationship with this holy God in your midst? And even if so what does it mean to think about all these sort of social interactions that I have with the people, and also with the people who are outside the community? How do I live in relationship with them? But that's all in the framework of how do I live out this covenant relationship with who God is. So it's definitely an appropriate and necessary term as far as thinking about how do we journey together. Covenant frames those sort of concepts. Like it's interesting to talk about the problem of thinking theologically and what that means, and how that is almost pushes people away from thinking about some of these complex issues, because it's like, well, theology is for the theologians type of thing. And one of the things that I teach at Providence University College is our Introduction to Christian Theology course, which is one of our required courses for undergraduate students. And part of my first lecture, I try to point out that we are all thinking theologically, whether we recognize it or not. And I use Elaine Robinson, one of her from her textbook on theology, about like the difference between embedded and deliberative theology. And this embedded theology is just the theology that we glean from everyday life, whether that be social media, whether that be the TV programs we watch, or the documentaries, or maybe from casual conversations in church, and all those sort of things, where we're just in the places we find ourselves, we are being shaped theologically about how we view God, our relationship with others, what it means to love or to worship God. What is it? Like those things are all just, and deliberative theology on the other side is where we pause and we think about, well, what do we believe about these certain topics, and why do we believe those sort of things? And so saying, you probably have done a lot of embedded theology up until now, and not as much deliberative theology. But this, your time at Providence, or your time at in this course, is an active deliberative theology, where we're taking some of the things that are embedded in your course of life, and we're examining why you believe what you believe, and to frame those sort of questions. So we examine about who we are. So you're thinking theologically, you're doing theology, whether you think you are or not, just by being in the world. And
yeah, and I think I remember coming across some of those statements that you're just mentioning. I'm not sure if you're familiar with J. Richard Middleton. I think he was talking a little bit about some of those things that we kind of almost made that separation between our everyday human life and in terms of theological thinking, whereas like what you're saying is that it's embedded in us, whether or not we choose to realize that we are all thinking theologically, because in the back of our minds, there is an aspect of God, and so we're trying to figure out okay, so how do I live this out, these ideas of God, and how do I in the ways that I treat my wife and my children, and how do I do my job, and maybe even something as simple as going to the grocery store and meeting someone down the aisle, and so on and so forth. And I totally agree. In some ways, in some fashion, we are always thinking theologically. So I'm not sure if you had taken the time to think about this a little bit, but what do you think? There are some ways of how we can think of theology, think theology, and maybe just provide some examples.
Well, it's the challenge of time, and the challenge of finding sort of those rhythms and sort of those spaces to reflect on aspects of life, and those times don't always sort of come by. Now, like, one of the things I think for me, it's always the challenge of too great of ambition, and then not always being able to fulfill those sort of ambitions. And so part of my recommendation is to just, instead of trying to, if you want to start engaging in some of this more deliberative theology or wrestling with things, is instead of saying, well, I'm going to read these 10 books, we'll just pick one good one at that moment, and kind of engage that way and think about it. And to try to take that a little bit step by step. One of the things that is always doing life in community is key, because it encourages us. It helps us to see the world through other people's eyes and other people's experiences. And kind of, if you form, even just with a couple people, some sort of group that encourages you to read and to think together, that can pay off in more ways than one, for sure, just because it's key to do life together. And that's part of what the Christian community offers, is community, is that journeying together, and accountability, and motivation, and desire. So that is those sort of two things. Don't start small, keep yourself encouraged, and do it with other people, because that is absolutely
and I love that thought, because of the community is just so needed nowadays, and whether or not you're talking theology, but even then, even in our conversation now, is that in some ways we are thinking theologically in everything that we say and do. And it's interesting, coming back to the idea of community. It's funny, that during this current pandemic, it really has caused us to kind of be separated in a lot of ways. And I realize, that we're home a lot, and I really don't like the idea of self-isolation, because I don't really believe that we were designed or created to be like that. I really believe that we were designed to be in community with one another, and whether it be our families, our friends, our church people, our leadership, and so on and so forth. And it really has caused a stirring. And I don't like isolation, because one of the things my pastor always keeps reminding us is that isolation is a killer. And I think it really has, because it has really affected a lot of people in the world today, especially in their mental state, and caused a lot of mental health issues. Because, like I said, we were designed for community, and that's all part of thinking theologically. That we get together with one another, we talk about the things of God, and it may not just necessarily be that about God, but every aspect of life that includes God in it.
Yeah.
Dr. Chris, I wanted to, you had thrown the idea out at me there, is that about how pastors can help their congregations think theologically, and through different topics during their messages, and I know that you've been a pastor for a while. What can you kind of elaborate further on that whole thought?
Yeah, like one of the examples that I could give is that working through the Psalms. I did that one summer where I just because it was a good way to, because especially in Saskatchewan, probably similar in Manitoba, that as soon as it's warm, people disappear because kind of say it's only warm for a short period of time. So I'm going to make the most of it. So we often had a quite a bit smaller community, and so the Psalms were good for a kind of a one-off sort of aspect. But what I did was because of all, like for preaching, for teaching, like Brueggemann's sort of Psalms categories are helpful with orientation, disorientation, and reorientation. And so I kind of preached a little bit on just sort of the categories, but then I slowly kind of worked through the Psalms, and I kind of would go back to those sort of things, and I would kind of reinforce those categories in each sort of message, and try to explain how these things are working out a little bit, and just kind of in a slow sort of methodical way where I'd kind of always call back to those aspects. And so, and I think that was just one example of trying to use a theological framework, albeit Brueggemann is very practical in many ways, and try to work those aspects into to messages, and then not sort of assume that that somebody heard the first message or the third message also heard the seventh message type of thing. But the seventh message, I would kind of weave some of those things, and not with the full explanation, but kind of weave those. Hey, remember when we're talking, like I talked about a couple weeks ago, Brueggemann here, and these sort of aspects, and these are the way that it's developed in this psalm, and this is why we would leave those sort of things. And I remember in one of my last week at the church I was pastoring, one of the people got up and they were kind of talking about trying to leave me with some encouraging messages. And I said, I will never read the Psalms without thinking through those categories again. And then, so as a reminder that, I had, and that was something I had done earlier on in my time there in the first or second summer. And so it kind of stuck with him. And then it reminded me that I had been successful in kind of communicating one key concept, at least in a person's reading of the Psalms, that would bring a sort of benefit to their that had been some sort of benefit to their lives, and might not have encountered other than, and then doing a little bit of theology in the pulpit, that sort of way. And one thing that I did at different points too is kind of like, this is where I'm being influenced here by this sort of reading here. And if you're interested in it, these are some ways that you can kind of touch on those aspects as well. So I kind of would weave in a little bit of, this is where my thoughts are coming from. And if you find these thoughts interesting, then this is a way that you can go explore, because I think there are people who are really excited about engaging in these sort of topics, but there's almost it's like a menu at a restaurant which has 100 different options, right? Sometimes you're overwhelmed by choice, and definitely today you're overwhelmed by the different options that you have. So if you can point to a couple directions as a Christian leader, as a pastor, then it can help somebody at least kind of be directed to areas that can help them. And a lot of like the good books, there are sort of shorter YouTube clips or podcasts where the summaries of the books kind of can be really helpful there. And so as an introduction to some of these more complex ideas. And I think that's one of the things that I had to learn is that you can't give too much right there. And that's a slow process of
because there's just so much right at our fingertips in regards to resources. And like I recently just started. I do watch quite a few videos on YouTube, but I've kind of gotten more and more into podcasts, right? Because not a whole lot of people have time to really sit down and watch and listen to a particular video. But you put on the podcast, kind of playing like noise in the background kind of thing, whether you're cleaning the house or driving down the road on the highway, which is where I probably do most of my listening. But yeah, I mean the vast amount of resources that it's available, it's so it can be overwhelming. So you kind of almost like you have to pick and choose, like, who do I listen to? And I'm always looking for more names and more topics that I can get my hands on. And that's the other thing that we were discussing was is pastors nowadays of how important it is for them to kind of stay on the ball when it comes to theological matters and keeping up with today's trend, or because somebody's always going to find something new or explore new truths and new ideas, and that could possibly help, especially a lot of pastors today that may have possibly have gone to seminary 40-50 years ago. Well, the resources that we have now was not available back then. And so, like I said, something is always new coming up. And so I think a lot of pastors, especially now, I think really do need a refresher when it comes to thinking theologically.
Absolutely. And that's one of the definitely the pressures in the pastoral position, is that you go through, whether you did undergrad in theology or the master's in theology, when you get into the church, there's so many pressures and things going on as far as the administrative things that you maybe didn't expect or prepare for, and how those sort of really get into your schedule, your weekly schedule, where theological reflection is often the last thing that you actually have space for. And it's definitely a challenge. And then there's so many things that you have to keep up with, where I recognize that as well, even being an academic and as a person who loves theology for fun, the pressures of committee meetings and connecting with volunteers and all those sort of organizational things definitely compacted that sort of time. And I'm actually teaching a course this semester on pastoral theology. And one of the things I was reminded of in preparation for the course, Eugene Peterson's The Contemplative Pastor, which is one of my favorite sort of books. And I read it back many years ago. I think it was originally published in 1989 or around then. And but I remember reading it again over the summer in preparation. It was a reminder that we busy ourselves with so many things, and we need to keep prayer and at the front and center of our theological as our theological task. And that probably goes with our relationship with God. But it also reminded me of how we need to carve out essential spaces so that we are prepared to be the best pastors for our individual communities, and to prepare. And I agree, discerning what's going on out there is a key part of the task, because you are often the person that people go to try to make sense of these sort of things. And so carving out that time and kind of blocking it off as meetings. You say, I got a meeting here on Tuesday between 9 and 12. That one of the recommendations that came from Peterson's book is as well. You block that time off. You encounter God, through prayer, through reading, through reflection, is serving your community well, and a way of being essential.
Pastoring, just by even talking to some of my own pastor friends and just hearing about some of the things that that you hear on the news or hear on social media, whatever. And it's like pastoring is becomes almost become demanding, especially nowadays, because one of the things I don't really appreciate, well, not really appreciate, is that it's unfortunate that some of them have become the jack of all trades when it comes to pastoring,
Mhm.
right? And it's unfortunate, because I did a segment a while ago about the importance of servanthood within the church, so that the pastor doesn't have to clean the toilets or vacuum the rugs or the carpet or pick up people at the church. And whereas, like you're saying, that where he has his focus on thinking theologically and prayer and Bible reading and study and all these different things, that he has to focus in on. But unfortunately, some of these people are just not, they're just not unwilling to not willing to serve and to help and to kind of ease off the burden of the pastor. And so and I like all these different ideas, and that the pastor really should be thinking theologically, and not having to worry about all these other different things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just
Yeah, no, I understand, and then like creating a culture of participation, of volunteerism is partly something that you can do within a community,
yeah.
and kind of shaping those sort of aspects is key and core values. And kind of one of the things that I thought of when you were talking too is part of what I believe the task of the pastor is in the pulpit is to model that theological wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think it's the expectation is that you have it all figured out and you can answer every sort of question. And that is in some ways the traditional model. But I think a little bit of allowing people to see behind the curtain of what you're thinking about through the week, and say, like, when I was preparing this, then I read like this news thing came up, or this sort of conversation came up, obviously maintaining confidentiality, but say like these, and it caused me to think about this in a way that I hadn't thought about it before. And this was leading me down this road. A little bit of that conversational wrestling, I think, can model a good sort of approach, because sometimes you think, well, I do all the research here and the questions, oh, I figured out this question, I got the answer, and you just give the answer. Well, actually walk through the wrestling and the questioning, and then you can help people see what goes into your sort of theological ideas. And that's was one of the things that I tried to do as well.
Yeah. It is a challenge, especially now. Like I know that you had mentioned at the beginning of this discussion that we've become really busy people, and society has really taken off. And you got microwaves, you got drive-throughs, and it's almost like just a quick kind of deal, right? Like everybody wants to go faster, and and it's unfortunately that we've kind of treated church matters and ideas of God and theologically almost in the same fashion. And it's becoming, I don't know, it's okay to slow down once in a while, as even just as a person, not just as a pastor, but even just as a person, right? And I know that,
sure.
And then I know that we can probably go on and talk more about that. We're kind of running a little bit out of time here. But Dr. Chris, I want to give you the opportunity right now just to kind of maybe just explain to our viewers a little bit about Providence College. And like I said, I had the opportunity and the privilege of attending there and receiving my MA from there, and maybe just explain how maybe some information of where they can get a hold of it.
Yeah, for sure. Like we're our Providence institution. We have the Providence University College, which gives which is our undergraduate program, and then Providence Theological Seminary, which does master's programs as well, and a doctor of ministry also. And we have both for the theological seminary, both like biblical studies and counseling as ways that you can engage with theological education. As I teach in the university college, and so it's great to be able to engage with these mostly young students who are ready to think about some key concepts, and to kind of shape them at an early stage, and to try to get them to open up to some of these questions and reflections that way. If our website is prov.ca, and there you can get all the information you're they're looking for if you're interested in Providence. And yeah, we have a great sports program as well. Our soccer, volleyball, and basketball programs are very good, and they compete. And I think
they
our
do have
top ranked.
And they do have lodging available. So if you need somewhere to stay, I mean, they do have dorms available.
Yeah, and great campus, new facility, and part of like what we're trying to train, Christian leaders and give them an opportunity and the best foundation to succeed in the ministries and wherever that may be, whether like, and our programs, especially like at the University College, we have business, we have health sciences, sociology, psychology, as well as biblical studies. And so our approach is really creating a well-rounded educational experience, so that if you go into the business workplace, that you can be, the extension of Christ in that place, both with excellence in Christian character and excellence in business. And our approach is very holistic as far as that goes. And so it's a great place to teach, a great place to work, and great students and people.
Well, there was the few times that I have been there. I'm not sure if they still do this or not, but or maybe even this year, was that I had opportunity to partake in these 1 week modules from Monday to Friday, and basically they went from, I believe, around 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. kind of deal. So I think those were more designed for pastors if they wanted to do the audit or the credit. And so you do have that option, like even in our discussion, if you wanted to get the little bit of nugget of truth or a little bit of extra, push in the understanding of the Bible. I don't know. Do they still offer things like that? Yeah,
those are primarily through the Theological Seminary that offers those 1 week module courses at different places throughout the semester. They normally have some at the beginning and some in the middle of the semester, where you have a module week. And so if you're interested, you can pop in there. Some courses as well, if you're in the Winnipeg area, are where you just have like 1 day every month where you go in for courses as well. And there are some that are primarily offered online in the seminary as well. So there's lots of opportunity to try to get it to fit your schedule and to open up those
for those
aspects.
For those people that may not necessarily have the time to quit their job or quit their ministry just to go, but just having that small portion of time to be able to go and just learn for a day or for a week, and just kind of set aside a portion of your everyday life and just go receive some upgrade, basically.
Yeah, and going forward, a lot of things that we've learned from the pandemic, and Providence has a new president as now, and there's a lot of initiatives that are directed towards some of those key credentialing, sort of micro-credentialing type of experiences. So if you're interested in theological education and trying to work that into your life, please contact the people in the enrollment department. They'd be happy to provide more information and try to figure out the plan that can best serve you and in your current situation, your current ministry experience.
And that's prov.ca, prov.ca, and
that's right.
All the information will be there. And I really would encourage, ladies and gentlemen, I really would encourage you to take advantage of those resources and some of those courses that are there, and a lot of great teachers. Dr. Chris is one of them, and just find out information. Get that further push that you need in your idea of thinking theologically, and it really would be a blessing to you. So, Dr. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully we can set aside a time to maybe do it again.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on, Alec. I appreciate it, and all the best in your ministry.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and be sure to check back again for another exciting episode of Created to Learn. God bless you all.